Now, for more on China and Germany's relations, I'm joined by Sean Ding, the co-founder and CEO of GRisk. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Rachelle.
So let's start with what you saw as your biggest takeaways from this dialogue.
Sure. I think the biggest takeaway from yesterday's dialogue is clearly China and Germany's commitment to upholding the principles of multilateralism, as well as the willingness to co-build strong institutions at the international level.
So then, with that being said then, that they're on the same page, which sectors do you think are really going to benefit the most from this improved market access?
Well, I think actually, all sectors will benefit from this greater willingness to work together. But in particular, the banking sector, the financial services sector, securities, as well as insurance will probably see the most benefit.
And why do you think that was an important place to start at this dialogue?
Well, I think this dialogue really signifies China and Germany's willingness to work together within the frameworks of global institutions such as the G20, WTO, World Bank, IMF, OECD, and of course AIIB, which Germany was an early partner to. So I think with that sort of attitude and that kind of commitment, it really would benefit the entire financial sector. It's really a positive signal for the global business community.
And speaking of the business community, how do various industry groups in both countries see these closer ties helping them?
Well, I think for the Chinese business groups, you can see from the agreement that they published from this dialogue, which, by the way, shows a very high level of granularity as well as specificism. So I think the Chinese business community have been working for a long time to push for sort of more openness in Germany, as well as for German companies to work within China. So the Chinese insurance industry, for example, they have been willing to work with their German partners in setting up either joint ventures or work with wholly owned German subsidiaries in China, which this meeting has promised to deliver.
As with any relationship, there can be some points of friction, and we know that Germany's BDI, an industry group there, has shown some concerns. They want to see more scrutiny and perhaps a little less reliance on China, sort of a shift in that relationship. How do you see both sides navigating some of these issues?
Sure. I think going back to the BDI report, I think the core of that report is asking for a more open China instead of advocating for a more closed Germany. And if you look at BDI's track record, last year when Berlin passed a regulation that would limit non-European investment in the so-called strategic sectors in Germany, BDI actually came out and advocated for greater openness of the German investment climate. So I think these sort of criticism or complaints, if you will, from the European countries and from Germany is something to be expected by the Chinese financial and business community. And all they have to do is to make sure that they monitor and track all these kind of policy signals and be cautious of these sort of signals being politically amplified and permeate into the political arena.
And you certainly raised an interesting point about wanting more market access without closing off Germany. So speaking of that, as we look at, on the flip side, the US-China relationship and what's happening with trade concerns there, how is that impacting China-Germany ties?
Well, I think the China-US trade dispute has definitely been a wake-up call for both Beijing and Berlin. The implications for China is obvious, but for Berlin, I think, and by extension, the European Union, they have realized after the China-US trade dispute has initiated just how fragile international institutions can be and perhaps have become. So I think German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the German industry groups have repeatedly emphasized the need for Germany not to take sides in the China-US trade dispute. However, it is definitely in their best interest, in Europe's best interest, to see global institutions that are capable, effective, and resilient. So I think there is really an opportunity here for China and Germany to build that kind of resilience. And the timing is great because Davos is just around the corner.
And speaking of Davos, we know that you also have the G20, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the Belt and Road, Eurasian connectivity, and of course, European infrastructure. So just how important is this bilateral relationship when it comes to what happens between Asia and Europe?
Well, I think it's hugely important because China, with this Belt and Road initiative, sees Europe as an integral partner in China's desire to really, ramp up infrastructure investment and building across the region. And I think, within the global economic atmosphere today, if you have China and Germany as two strong advocates for both multilateral cooperation as well as bilateral level dialogue, I think it's a really good thing for the global economy.
All right, thank you so much for your insights.
you.
Sean Ding there, co-founder and CEO at GRisk.